विश्वमहा सो सतगुरु का रूप है, अनुभव में पहचान। एक शब्द गुरुदेव का, ताको अनंत विचार। था कि मुनि जन पंडिता, वेद न पावे पार। वेद थके ब्रह्मा थके, थकिया शेष महेश। गीता हूँ की गम नहीं, तहाँ सद्गुरु उपदेश। All great souls, spiritual seekers who are connected to this satsang, I bow down to the lotus feet of Sadgurudev on behalf of every one of us and ask for his light of wisdom with which we all be open to accept the truth and get rid of the darkness of ignorance and false knowledge that unfortunately is prevalent today everywhere. Though I was supposed to continue on the topic of karma that we started last week onwards, but I would get to that after covering a bit on various aspects of God realization that people think as different paths. So we need to touch upon this a bit, and then I'll come back to cover the details of karma. We all must have heard about the terminology called karma yoga, bhakti yoga, Gyaan yoga, Raj yoga, and we think that all these are different paths that lead to the same realization. So today we will try to understand, when we say these are the different paths, what do we actually mean by that? And are they really different, or they are different phases of the same practice? So we need to understand that today. So Shirangji, can you confirm once that I am audible to everybody?
Yes, Vijayji, we can see your screen and we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you. So many people think that Gyaan Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, these are different paths. So let us first try to understand what is the state of the soul when it is called Jnana Yoga. What is the state of the soul when it is called Bhakti Yoga? What is the state of the soul when it is called Karma Yoga? Let us try to understand that the second stanza of these all words is Yoga. So definitely the path is something which lead to the union with Almighty. The path has to be something where the soul has to be in union with Almighty. So considering that as a framework, as a baseline, Let us see how the Gyaan Yoga is happening, in which a soul is attaining the union with Almighty. What is Gyaan? Gyaan means the experience, the realization of the true quality and the nature of the entities. For example, Supreme Soul, the actual realization, the actual experience of the Supreme Soul, the actual experience of the individual soul, the actual awareness and the experience of how the the transient nature of Prakriti works with us. So when we attain the direct experience of these entities, not by reading, not by listening, not by talking, but it's called darshan. Darshan means something that you experience directly. You get the darshan of it. Nobody is talking about it, but you are yourself getting the direct experience of it. That's how you get the gyan of it as it is. Whatever it is in front of you, not in a written article format where people have described something and you're interpreting it in your own way. No, nothing like that. When there is a direct experience of the entity as it is, जो वस्तु जैसा रहे तैसा वाकु जान. Whatever the form and the existence of an entity is, you literally you experience it directly with your own consciousness. No explanation, no words, direct experience. And when you move in the path of attaining yoga with such direct experiences of the entities, this path is called Gyaan Yoga. So how would you attain the experience of these entities? When it has to, when the subject is, let's say, Prakriti, something gross, then how do you attain the experience of the grossness? You can attain at least the superficial experience of the grossness with your sensory organs. But then, how about the subtle creation of the Prakriti? Maybe the gross creation of the Prakriti, it is perceivable with your senses. But then with the Prakriti, with the fundamental atom of inertness, there are other creations which are subtle in nature, where your senses cannot reach. So maybe you can use some gadgets to amplify it so that it comes under the frequency of your perception. But yet, there'll be limitations with your gadget and with your senses to go in the entire dimension of the expansion of the creation, because the creation is so vast that even your senses and gadgets will fall short of giving us the or demystifying the complete science of Prakriti and how it works. But yet your senses are capable at least to perceive the Prakriti. But through yoga, through the practice of meditation, when we learn the art of perceiving the fundamental atom, the Parmanu itself, then nothing else in the Prakriti remain unperceivable by you, because your consciousness is refined to the level of the atom of the Prakriti. So when you're able to perceive or connect with the atom of the Prakriti, then you have actually reached to a state where the entire expansion of the creation will come into your perception. So the mode of perceiving the things have changed now. Instead of using the gadget to bring the farthest and the tiniest element within the coverage area of your sensory organs, you do otherwise. You actually take your consciousness to the tiniest element and to the farthest element. What does gadget do? Gadget brings those into your perception area, whereas yoga takes you or your consciousness to the target element. If the target element is the tiniest one, then your perception is refined to that level through the practice of meditation, where even the tiniest comes under your perception, and even the farthest comes under your perception, because you expand your consciousness to that far where your senses cannot reach. Similarly, when you talk about the perception of soul, the individual being that we are, or the perception of supreme being, all these are possible only by the practice of meditation. So through the journey of meditation, not by reading, many people think that there are myths. People say, no, I follow Gyaan Yoga. I discuss things. I use my intellect to understand things. I try to understand the concepts, and I am in the Gyaan Yoga path. The real Gyaan Yoga is the actual perception, not the intellectual perception, but the actual perception, where the entities which you are trying to understand, you're not reading about it, but you are literally having darshan, the direct experience of that entity. So whichever entity you want to understand, through the process of meditation, you're able to take your consciousness directly to that entity and experience it directly, not through anything else, not even using your senses, not even using your senses. Why so? Because the moment you use your body, your senses to reach to certain thing, you are constrained by the limits and the boundaries of your senses. Anything which is beyond the frequency of your sensors, like your eyes, your ear, they have certain frequency range. Anything beyond that, through these sensors you cannot perceive them. So Gyan Yoga, the real Gyan Yoga, is not about trying to understand things with your senses, but the real Gyan Yoga is about taking your consciousness to the subject that you want to understand. And that's how you get eventually the direct experience of the Almighty. You attain union with Almighty in this endeavor where you're taking your consciousness to the subject. So when the subject becomes the Almighty himself, how would the Gyan Yoga happen with Almighty? It can only be possible when we learn how can I raise my consciousness to the level of Almighty and attain union with Him, or connect my consciousness with the supreme consciousness of Almighty. Only when we learn that science of consciousness that only Sadguru gives, through which you learn how to raise my consciousness beyond the body and could connect with the Almighty directly and get the direct experience of the Almighty. When that happens, this is called Gyaan Yoga, where you are directly having the experience of Almighty. So with that framework in mind, I'll read these lines. Gyan means the realization of the true nature of the Supreme Soul, the individual soul, and the Prakriti. We might succeed in collecting all the knowledge of the inert material world through senses with the help of gadgets, But the conscious elements can never be known by using inert instruments. Though the consciousness of the Supreme Soul pervades all matter, inert as well as conscious, it can only be known by the conscious base, like individual soul. It can never be, the supreme consciousness can never be known by our senses. Further on Gyan Yoga, the Atma, however, keeps on identifying itself with the different embodied forms and does not realize its free conscious nature. The one who is in ignorance, even though you read books, you say that I am following Gyan Yoga, I'm reading about Atma, that Atma is something which is beyond senses, Atma is something which resides in the body. You're reading everything about it. But just by reading, just think about it, just by reading, just by listening, just by even thinking about it, will you ever come into that experience, that realization, where you find yourself as a soul residing in the body? Just like you perceive your body right now, very clearly you find yourself living in a house where you are able to notice the four walls around you, and you have a very clear perception that my body is confined within this house. There is no imagination about it. There's no assumptions about it. Similarly, when you have a direct Gyaan of Atma, when you have direct experience of Atma or the soul, you would not have to assume anything about it. You would experience that I am a soul, and right now I am confined within the body. I am in Sushmana Nadi, in the region of the heart. And this experience is an inner journey experience. It's not from the outer reading or the listening or the contemplating in the mind. This experience is beyond all these. So even though we read lot about Atma, you still continue to identify yourself with the body only. You don't get to that level of experience by reading. But when in the inner journey of meditation, Atma realizes its true nature, it finds itself free from the mind and body in an unalloyed conscious form, meaning there is no mixing of inertness into it. It finds itself a pure conscious being. And then it realizes the capability of even experiencing the Supreme Soul. So Swamiji says in Swarved, Atma Gyaan jab uday bhai, sudhi bhai apana desh. The moment you realize your own true self, immediately the knowledge of you having come from the zone of immortality also awaken. You immediately, the moment you recognize yourself as a true conscious being, immediately the knowledge that, oh, you don't belong to this place, you actually have come from the zone of immortality, that knowledge also awakens. So in this pure state, the Atma gains the correct knowledge of the phenomenal world also as an observer. The moment you reach to that level in the journey of meditation, it is then from your own base of consciousness, without using your indriyas, then you see the phenomenal world, the 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 worldly creation, the gross world also as it is, without getting filtered or constrained by your senses. Right now, your senses are showing you only the partial perception of the world. The entire existence of the world is not coming into your perception. It is being filtered or constrained by your senses. But the moment you raise yourself beyond senses, you gain capability to comprehend things as it is on the basis of your own consciousness. So this very process is Gyaan Yoga. This very process is Gyaan Yoga. But then with this now we are able to, most likely we are able to now relate that how is then Gyaan Yoga possible without Vihangam Yoga? How is it possible? Because the very journey through which the Gyaan Yoga has to happen, that journey is called Vihangam Yoga. That very journey is called Vihangam Yoga. The soul has to realize its true nature first before knowing the Supreme Soul. And once it has known the Supreme Soul, it knows everything, everything about Prakriti, and also one that pervades the Prakriti, the omniscient supreme, supreme being. The moment you connect with the supreme being, then the knowledge, the wisdom that is there in the consciousness of supreme being, it starts coming into your soul and you know everything. So we can understand that though the name is Gyaan Yoga, but the Gyaan Yoga aspect is inherent into the journey of Vihangam Yoga. You cannot attain Gyaan Yoga without the practical process which lead you to Gyaan Yoga, and that very practical process is called Vihangam Yoga. So Gyaan Yoga is the Gyaan aspect of Vihangam Yoga. When you travel in the journey of Vihangam Yoga meditation with the aspect of Gyaan, meaning you 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 get the experience of things and you know check mark your milestone. Yes, now I am experiencing the five universal sounds. Oh, now I'm experiencing 10 mystical sounds. Now I'm experiencing 8 chakras. Now I'm going through the Kundalini awakening. Now I have been taken beyond 10th door. All these experiences are the milestone in this journey. And this is what are the different ladders to eventually attain the state of Jnana Yoga, where you attain union with Almighty and you have the complete experience of Almighty. So the omniscient state in union with Almighty is what is Jnana Yoga, where the moment you come into union with Almighty, you also become omniscient at that point of time. Let's touch upon Bhakti Yoga, or the yoga of devotion. Here again, there are myths. People think that Bhakti Yoga means that you just keep offering Bhakti in any form you want. In any form you want, just you offer Bhakti and eventually you will attain yoga, union with Almighty. First of all, the very big misconception that people have in this field of spirituality is that they think bhakti can be done in any form you want. This is the biggest misconception. Swamiji says in Swarved that those who do not know the difference between karma and bhakti, they would never know what bhakti yoga is. Those who do not know the difference between karma and bhakti would never realize what the true bhakti is. You can perform karma in different ways, because the karma is something which you perform with your senses, with your body, with your organs of actions, with the things around you. The prakriti is always transient, always changing. So you'll have different ways to do things in the prakriti because of the varieties of things in the prakriti. But those variations are within the domain of karma. You can perform karma different ways, different ways. Somebody is good at doing something, somebody is bad at doing something, somebody is efficient, somebody is inefficient. There are different ways and pace of doing things, but that doing is not bhakti. That doing is never bhakti. Doing is karma. Doing is always karma. Karma and bhakti are two different things. So before we talk about bhakti yoga, we understand what yoga is. We know that yoga is union of a soul with supreme soul. That's what is the yoga. In yoga, the individual soul has to attain union with the supreme soul. But how about bhakti? Is bhakti the subject of sensory organs? Is bhakti the subject of sensory organs? Bhakti is never the subject of sensory organs. Bhakti is never the subject of your organs of actions. The difference of karma and bhakti is this, that karma is the subject of your organs of actions. Karma is the subject of your body and indriyas. But bhakti is always the subject of soul. Indriyas can never perform bhakti. Only soul can perform bhakti. So if we understand this, then when you sit in front of your aradhya, your God, when we sit in front of God, whatever statue or whatever symbol we have in the name of God, when we sit in front of Him or we visit a holy places, do we think we are performing bhakti? Though we name it bhakti, because that's what is known as bhakti. We think that that's what bhakti is. But all these efforts, what is the outcome of those efforts? Because outcome of bhakti is liberation, immediate liberation. If you're in bhakti, means you're liberated. Do you think that when you chant mantras or when you visit temple, you're liberated? You're not. But the immediate outcome of bhakti is liberation. Immediate outcome of bhakti is liberation if it is real bhakti, not the karma. So when we visit places, when we do various chanting and prayers, we informally label it as bhakti. But actually, that is a preparation for bhakti. That is not bhakti. That is a preparation for bhakti. When we go back to the topic of karma, which we will begin after this, then we will understand that in the karma itself, there are three different aspects of karma. One is called karma, ordinary karma. The second one is called vikarma. And the third one is called akarma. So had we got the understanding of those, then it would have been a lot easier. But we'll try to cover that after this anyway. But let's try to understand it back here. So bhakti is the subject of soul. So unless we attain the grip of the consciousness of the soul, bhakti has not begun. Right now, we have grip only on our organs of actions. We have grip on our sensory organs. We have grip on our intellect. Whenever we think that, let me think about something, you're trying to use your intellect. Let me recall something from the past. You're trying to use your chitta. Okay, let me imagine what can happen. What should I do? You're trying to use your mind and the intellect. So you have a bit of grip on these faculties, but when it comes to performing your bhakti by using your consciousness directly, not your senses, we do not have that grip yet. So unless we attain that level where you get the grip of your consciousness, and now you can spread your consciousness beyond the reach of your senses. Only when you are able to expand your consciousness beyond the reach of your senses, meaning to the subject which was not perceivable, and now suddenly, with the help of consciousness, that subject also has become perceivable for you. Only when you transform to that level of perception where unperceivable has become perceivable for you, that is when you should understand that now you have got the grip over your consciousness. And when that level of grip is attained in the process of meditation, then the bhakti yoga begins. Because prior to that, there is no bhakti. Prior to that, it's only karma. So, with that framework in mind, let's try to read these lines. So, powerful forces of nature, such as the sun, the river, fire, wind, rain, they were all worshipped at some time or another by means of different rituals, right? The idea behind these rituals was to keep the deities appeased so that their anger may not cause harm to the human beings. Human beings started shaping their deities according to their imagination and bestowing all powers on these deities. The real nature of the omnipresent, omnipotent forces behind the working of the universe was beyond common human perception. And hence the devotion to various forms of deities continued. Right? So different kind of prayers which we have started naming it as devotion, they all started coming into effect just with this, because we don't have real experience of who is behind this creation, what is that force. So the forces that a human being could experience was the blow of a wind, the river flowing, the big mountains, the nature which is giving fruits, vegetables to them. So the prayer actually began with those nature, and they started giving a shape to it, and that's how different forms came into being for offering devotion. Even those devotional practices have one virtue: they mitigate one's egotistic tendency if practiced sincerely and not as a mere ritual. So, what it means is that even if it is that kind of worship, that kind of prayer, but yet that is very useful, because at least we accept that I am very negligible in front of these forces. This very tendency, this very attribute that we develop with these kind of prayer is also very, very essential for the path of devotion, where we really want to crush our ego. So they definitely are very fundamental into Bhakti Yoga, where you, by some means of practice, you're trying to crush your ego. So they are definitely a building block for Bhakti Yoga, but one must not consider that as the entire dimension of Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga is way, way, way beyond what we think the Bhakti is. The idols and their pictures, as well as the qualities attributed to them, are the projections of the human mind and not representation of reality. Unless the real nature of Supreme Soul, the individual soul, and the phenomenal world is known, any devotion is a delusion. You're just imagining, you're just assuming and creating emotion in your mind accordingly, right? Unless there is a real experience, it is all in the mind. It is all in the mind. And of course, that is also good. It is helping. It is helping to subside our ego and develop a sense of surrender within ourselves. But yet, it is all in the plane of mind. It is all in the plane of mind. And the bhakti is never within the plane of mind. The real bhakti is not in the mind. The real bhakti is a state that the soul attains. It is not a state of the mind, it is a state of the soul, which is beyond mind, beyond indriyas. So the next line says, on the other hand, Gyaan Yoga, which is devoid of bhakti, stops the progress of the individual soul at a certain stage of development. Here it says that without the knowledge of the Supreme Soul, the bhakti cannot happen. And without the bhakti, the Gyaan cannot happen. Both are complementary to each other. It says, unless the real nature of Supreme Soul, the individual soul, and the phenomenal world is known, meaning unless the Gyaan of these happens, the bhakti will not awaken. And without the bhakti, the Gyaan also will not fructify. The Gyaan and Bhakti both have to go hand in hand for them to attain its completion. The Gyaan cannot complete without Bhakti, and the Bhakti cannot complete without Gyaan. If the Bhakti is happening without Gyaan, then it's called Andha Bhakti. We think that we are performing Bhakti, but we are performing Bhakti without realization, without darshan, just in the assumptions of the mind. We are performing bhakti. What is that bhakti? That bhakti is delusional bhakti. That bhakti is andh bhakti. That bhakti is not a bhakti. It's a karma. We are performing karma and we are considering it as bhakti. So bhakti and the Gyaan are complementary to each other. Bhakti cannot happen without Gyaan, and Gyaan cannot happen without Bhakti. Because when we, even in the path of realizing things, you would need to get into these required attributes where you surrender yourself, where you feel yourself negligible in front of supreme forces. Only when you attain that servitude within yourself, the sense of surrender, the sense of service within yourself, which is the attribute of bhakti. So only when you start developing the attribute of bhakti within yourself, then only your Gyaan will progress from, moving beyond Kundalini to the self-realization, to the realization of Akshar Brahm, to the realization of Sadguru, and to the realization of Supreme Being. All these gradual progress would require you to have the attribute of bhakti within yourself. Then only your Gyan Yoga will reach to the epitome of what it promises to provide. So Jnana Yoga requires Bhakti. Bhakti Yoga requires Gyan. So how can one say that I am in Bhakti Yoga and have no experience? If one says I am in Bhakti Yoga and have no experience, and they think that for me only taking the name of Lord is what is enough, I'm in Bhakti Yoga. I'm in Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga without Gyan is not possible. Just like a handicapped man uses the Baishakhi, the support system, to stand and walk. Similarly, what is the Baishakhi of Bhakti? The support of Bhakti is the Gyan and Vairagya. Without Gyan and Vairagya, Bhakti cannot stand. Bhakti stands on the support of Gyan and Vairagya. So if people think that taking the name of God is Bhakti and have no experience of Almighty, just the name they are taking in the mind, and they think I'm doing Bhakti. It is so unfortunate that because of the illusions and false knowledge spread all over, people think that I am doing Bhakti and their life is lost. Because the Bhakti stands on knowledge, Bhakti stands on Gyan, Bhakti stands on Vairagya. And the Gyan means here not the bookish Gyan. Gyan here means the experience. Only when you experience an entity, then you get the real devotion for it. Otherwise, it's on all imaginary in your mind. But the moment you see the things for yourself, the real love flows for it. The real love flows for it only when you literally happen to experience it. So the bhakti require gyan, it goes hand in hand. The individual soul in its innate nature must stay as a faithful servant of its master, the Supreme Soul. This cannot be achieved without unwavering bhakti and devotion. Thus, Gyan Yoga and Bhakti Yoga go hand in hand. Bhakti Yoga without Gyan Yoga is mere delusion, and Gyan without Bhakti is an incomplete yoga. The Gyan will not reach to its fullest without the support of Bhakti. So, Bhakti Yoga is the Bhakti aspect of Vihangam Yoga. You would still require to go through all the milestone of Vihangam Yoga journey. But now you learned that, oh, even though I was actually moving in the Gyana Yoga, but then along with the experience of thing, I also needed the attribute of bhakti with it. Without that, my Vihangam Yoga will not progress, will not advance. So Vihangam Yoga is an umbrella in which you are actually doing the Jnana Yoga as well as Bhakti Yoga, both hand in hand. Without this, Vihangam Yoga is not progressing. Vihangam Yoga is progressing only when only when the Gyan Yoga and the Bhakti Yoga both are happening with its fullest potential. It's not that when you're doing Vihangam Yoga, then you are doing only partial Bhakti Yoga and partial Gyan Yoga. No, actually, when you are doing Vihangam Yoga, actually you're doing 100% Gyan Yoga and 100% Bhakti Yoga, both hand in hand. If anybody says that I am doing Bhakti Yoga, I am not doing Gyan Yoga, you can understand that there is something wrong. People don't understand what Bhakti Yoga is. That's why they are saying that I am not doing Gyan. You cannot separate Gyan Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. You cannot. Because Bhakti Yoga cannot progress without Gyan Yoga. Gyan Yoga cannot progress without Bhakti Yoga. So the combination of two is Vihangam Yoga. Vihangam Yoga cannot progress without Bhakti, and Bhakti cannot, flower within yourself grow within yourself without Gyaan. Only when you happen to experience Sadguru, then you get the real love for Sadguru. Only when you happen to experience Almighty, then your devotion is unbroken for Almighty. So you have to have the darshan, the real experience, for the devotion to grow within yourself. So bhakti yoga is the bhakti aspect of the same practice, Vihangam yoga. Just like we said, the Gyaan yoga is the Gyaan aspect of Vihangam yoga. The journey is same. But when we are looking it from the aspect of experience, we call it Gyaan yoga. When we are looking it from the aspect of bhakti, right from the very first stage of Vihangam yoga, the bhakti begins. The aspect of bhakti begins. The attributes which are required for bhakti, they are required right from very first stage. You know, Prabhu Prasad Sadguru Daya Mana ho स्वाधीन, अन्य युक्ति कोई नहीं लगे सदगुरु चरण अधीन. It says that even controlling mind, the very first stage of Vihangam Yoga, we think that we concentrating at the focal point will be enough for us to control our mind. It will not. Because only when the Almighty will bless and Sadguru will show mercy, Prabhu Prasad, Sadguru Daya, Mana hoye Swadhin, then the mind comes to rest. Anya yukti koi nahi lage, Sadguru Charana. There is no other way. You are only setting yourself into this process where you are observing at the focal point. This is the process. But then this process needs the blessings from Almighty and the mercy from the Sadguru. Then the mind comes to rest. So you can understand that the element of devotion, the attributes of devotions need to be in practice right from very first stage of Vihangam Yoga. So when we were discussing Gyaan Yoga, we thought that, oh, that means in Vihangam Yoga, actually we are doing Gyaan Yoga. But now when you are trying to understand, no, actually the very first stage onwards, we are in the element of devotion also. And we think, oh no, when we are traveling in Vihangam Yoga, actually we are doing Bhakti Yoga. Why do you find both aspect in it? Because that's what Vihangam Yoga is. Vihangam Yoga is 100% Gyaan Yoga and 100% Bhakti Yoga. So Bhakti Yoga is nothing but when you look at the Vihangam Yoga journey from the lens of devotion, you will find that the Vihangam Yoga is a Bhakti Yoga. When you look at Vihangam Yoga journey from the lens of Gyaan, you will find that the Vihangam Yoga journey is the Gyaan Yoga, where in the journey you are actually getting the experience. Vihangam Yoga is no assumptions. Vihangam Yoga is no imaginations. Vihangam Yoga is journey of experience, and Vihangam Yoga is journey of devotion. Karma Yoga, yoga of action. Many people say, oh, you know what? I am a karma yogi. Uh, I just do my work correctly, efficiently. So I am a karma yogi, right? People talk like that. People think that the karma yoga means that when you give your 100% to your duties, that is what is called karma yoga. That's what is the common misconception which we all must break today. People think that when I am giving my 100% to my duties and wholeheartedly unattached, people use these terminologies. People think that selflessly, when I am doing selflessly my duty, my whatever the responsibilities, then that's what is the karma yoga. Let us try to understand what Lord Krishna also said in Bhagavad Gita. Lord Krishna also said about Karma Yoga that he said, Yoga Karmasu Kaushalam. And this is where people started misinterpreting about it. When he said Yoga Karmasu Kaushalam, people thought that the expertise of performing any karma is yoga, is a karma yoga. That's what people interpreted it, or rather misinterpreted it. But what kind of expertise? That's where people could not understand. What kind of expertise? The real expertise of performing karma is when you're performing your karma, but you are not building the bondage of karma for yourself. Because at one place, Bhagavad Gita itself says that you have right on your karma, but not on the fruits of karma. You cannot decide that when you performed karma, you should not get fruits of it. You cannot decide that. You don't have right on it. Whether you consider in the mind that I am doing this karma selflessly or with selfie motive, whatever you swing your mood within your mind while you're performing your karma, it does not change this truth that you have no right on the fruits of karma. You have no right on it. When you think that in the mind, I'm thinking I am selfless, I just want to help this person, I am selfless, I don't expect anything in return. That's your side of karma. But what is the fruit of this karma? It does not mean that the fruits of karma is something that you are not born to. Even though you didn't expect anything out of it, even though you thought that you're doing it selflessly, it is just that now you are performing this karma piously. But every karma that you performed, the fruits of that karma is bound to happen because you performed it on the plane of your indriyas with your mind, not from the real plane of expertise that Bhagwan Shri Krishna is talking about. What is the real expertise of performing karma? The real expertise of performing karma is when you attain union with Almighty. You are in union with Almighty. You are truly selfless now, where you are not having any attachment. Then, because you're in devotion with Almighty, you have real detachment from the world. When you are in that state of Jivan Mukta Samadhi, where you are living in the body, but you are on the plane of Almighty. When you are on the plane of Almighty, when you are in the union with Almighty, in that state, when you bring your seven consciousness down to your body to perform actions, in that state of union, all the actions that we perform, you're performing the duties, but none of those karma is creating bondage for you. Your chitta is not depositing any bondage for the karma that you're performing, and that's why that karma is called akarma. Akarma. So what is the real meaning of yoga karmasu kaushalam? The real meaning is when you perform all your duties from the plane of akarma, from the plane of akarma, where the karma is not depositing for your bondage, it is only to benefit others. When you are performing those karma, these karmas are bringing change in the world, but causing is creating no bondage for you. That very expertise of performing karma is yoga. So we can understand it that, of course, the moment you attain that very expertise, at that very moment when you are having that expertise, you are already in union with Almighty. And that's why he said in Bhagavad Gita that the moment you raise your expertise of performing karma to a level where you reach to the utmost expertise of performing karma, you are actually in the state of yoga. Yoga, what is yoga? Yoga is when you reach to the the tip, the the epitome of the expertise, the topmost expertise of the karma. When you reach yourself, when your karma reaches to that level, then it is called yoga. Why that? Because before you reach to the state of jivan mukta, then your karma has not reach to that expertise. Only when you reach the level of Jivan Mukta Samadhi, where you are in union with Almighty, then your karma raises to the state of akarma, where the karma is no more causing bondage for the soul. There is no future births or the prarabdha getting built out of your actions. Otherwise, before reaching Jivan Mukt state, no matter how selfish or how selflessly you're performing karma, you are building prarabdha for your next life. You are building prarabdha for your next life. That means when you're doing good work, selflessly, you're serving people, it is building your future life, which will be more happier than now. But you are bound in the cycle of life and death. You're still creating the bondage of life and death, the bondage of cycle of life and death, even stronger by performing karma at the lower expertise level than Jivan Mukt state. If you have not attained the Jivan Mukt state in this life, then all the karma is happening at the lower level of expertise, not the karmasu kaushalam that Bhagwan Shri Krishna is talking about. So prior to attaining that state, whatever level of assumptions and imaginations is running in our mind that I am selfless, I am doing this and that without expecting any return, this is still not karma yoga. This is still not karma yoga. But what is karma yoga? How the karma yoga is then different from bhakti yoga? We'll get to that, but let's now, with this framework, read few lines and then I'll come to it. So karma yoga or yoga of action. The karma in common language means action done by the individual soul on account of its contact with Prakriti and its gunas. Yes, so any action that you perform on the basis of your indriyas, kind of encouraged by the trigunas of the Prakriti. Trigunas of the Prakriti is what actually engage you in actions. That's why it's written like this. So when the individual soul get into act in contact with Prakriti and its gunas, it's called karma. The tendencies of all karma is to bind the soul to Prakriti. The reason you get into action is because that's how it is designed. It is designed that you get attracted for actions, and these actions is a way to strengthen your bondage with the Prakriti even more. That means you will stay more in the worldly life by engaging, by building, by strengthening your bondage of karma. You will end one life, but by now you have piled up enough karma for you to begin another life. And that's how you are bound to the Prakriti, all because of the pile of karma that you are gathering now. So the tendencies of all karma is to bind the soul to Prakriti so that the soul becomes more and more attached to Prakriti. There are three kinds of karma in terms of how it deposits. So kriyaman karma, where these are the new karma that you perform to move forward in the life, right? So new karma in present life. Prarabdha karma is one that guides the life to the destined fruits of current life. This very life that you have got, there are certain destined fruits, and your life will automatically get those opportunities, you know without your effort, because you will automatically be served with those opportunities, and then your kriyaman karma will decide how much you leverage that opportunity. So prarabdha karma guides the life to the destined fruits of current life. Sanchit karma is one that, you perform new karma in this life, but then you didn't get the outcome of it, so they get deposited as Sanchit karma. So karma yoga, there is no action performed in association with the mind and body which does not bear fruits if it is guided by the mind. What it means is, there is absolutely no karma without fruits if it is performed by the indriyas and guided by the mind. So any karma which is being guided by the mind and performed by indriyas, that karma will have fruits no matter what you assume. So there is absolutely no action performed without fruit, without bearing fruits, if it is performed by the mind. Second line says, when the mind is dissolved to its source, the Atma is freed from the shackles of mind and becomes free to ascend higher to the Supreme Soul. So before attaining the base of Supreme Soul, the mind needs to be dissolved to come out of the range of mind. When the soul realizes its pure free form of Gyaan, is pure free form by Gyaan, the Sanchit karma is burned out and the liberated soul becomes free from karma. When the soul realizes its pure free form by Gyaan, the Sanchit karma is burned out and the liberated soul becomes free from karma. Swamiji says, Brahma Vidya Chinagi Udi, Lagi Karma Ghar Aag, कर्म वासना जर गई चेतन चेतन जाग. Swamiji says that only when the consciousness of the soul attains the light of Brahm, light of Ishwar, light of God, in that very union, in the process of union, when the Brahma energy enters into our body, then the Chitta, which was containing all the Sanchit karma, which was causing the prarabdha to happen and the next life to happen, all that, was decided by actually the Sanchit karma was the master repository. So this very master repository itself is vanished when we attain union with Almighty. And when that happens, when the soul is free from the bondage of karma, that very state is the state of karma yoga. So performing karma in the state of union with Almighty is karma yoga. Yoga karmasu kaushalam, the state of soul in which karma fails to bind soul in bondage, is called karma yoga. So what is karma yoga? The karma yoga is the akarma aspect of Vihangam yoga. In the journey of Vihangam yoga, when we attain that level in which we attain the level of akarma, in that state of akarma, when you get into your worldly duties, when you get into the worldly affairs, but in the state of akarma, then being performing the worldly duties, having got the union with Almighty is called Karma Yoga, where you are in union with Almighty and you are also performing worldly affairs. Swamiji describes this with the example of Paniharini, where a lady from a village is having a pot on her head filled with water. And then she also has two pots of water in two hands under her arms. She is holding these two pots tightly with the hand, and the pot over the head is just without being caught by her hand. It is just, she's holding it freely on her head by having her constant concentration there, that may it not lose the balance. She's just balancing it with her head while she is holding the other two pots in her hand. So what does it signify? It what does it symbolize? It symbolizes that her consciousness is constantly on the pot which is over her head while she is holding the other two pots in her hand. This is what exactly is the state of Karma Yoga. In Karma Yoga, you must have your Ashtam Surati constantly in the devotion of Almighty, and at the same time, your seven Suratis engaging with the worldly affairs. You do not lose your devotion of Almighty at any point of time, even while performing karma. And this devotion is not in the mind, but this devotion is with the real experience of Almighty, with the real devotion on Almighty. That means Karma Yoga is not possible without Gyaan Yoga and without Bhakti Yoga. Only when the Jnana Yoga has happened, the Bhakti Yoga is happening, it is only then the Karma Yoga is possible. Because you cannot attain the state of Karma Yoga without having reached the union of Almighty. Why it is called Karma Yoga? Because a Bhakti Yogi, when a Bhakti Yogi sent, and when you look at a Karma Yogi saint, what is the difference? The difference is this: a Bhakti Yogi saint will remain in the bliss of Almighty and will not engage in the worldly affairs, whereas a Karma Yogi will also remain in the bliss of Almighty, but it will engage in the worldly affairs. So, from the outer presentation, you find one yogi detached from the actions, where there is a physical detachment, meaning his indriyas is not getting into worldly affair. He is just sitting in the bliss of Almighty and maybe preaching those who come into his shelter. He will give the Gyaan and then he will get into the devotion because he's constantly having the devotion of Almighty. Whereas there is another yogi who is in the worldly affair but having the same level of devotion from inside, but also performing the worldly affair. So when a yogi is in the worldly affair, having attained union with Almighty, that yogi is called Karma Yogi. Whereas that yogi which is only in the devotion of Almighty and not in the worldly affair, that is called Bhakti Yogi. And what is Gyana Yogi? The Gyana Yogi is the one who is having the complete knowledge of Almighty and is also preaching this knowledge to others. He is not getting into daily worldly affairs, but all he is doing is preaching Gyaan to others. He is in the aspect of, spreading Gyaan to others and having complete knowledge within himself in the bliss of Almighty, in the devotion of Almighty. So the behavior of a karma yogi is different. Behavior of a Gyaan yogi is different. Behavior of a bhakti yogi is different from outside, but from inside, the state of soul is same. The state of soul is this, that the soul is in union with Almighty, whether it is a karma yogi or it is a bhakti yogi or it is a Gyaan yogi. Moving ahead, Rishi Patanjali's Raj Yoga. We have heard that Yam, Niyam, Asan, Pranayam, Pratyahar, Dharana, Dhyan, Samadhi. These are the 8 limbs of yoga, as Raj Yoga says. Yoga Sthit Vritti Nirodha. Patanjali says that when should we consider that the yoga has happened? It says when the vrittis stop rising from chitta. Says when the vrittis will stop rising from chitta, then that very state is the state of yoga. That's what Raj Yoga says. The cessation of the rise of vritti in chitta is the state of yoga. But in today's Raj Yoga, okay, I think before I talk about further on this, what is Briti, as Jasvinderji just asked, what is Briti? All the tendencies that drive us into actions are stored in our chitta. The chitta develop those tendencies based on the kind of karma we have been engaging in, not only in this life, but even from the previous lives. So these tendencies raise the trigger for action, the thoughts for actions. The thoughts that you get in the mind, where is it coming from? It is coming from your chitta. Chitta is the source of all thoughts that you get into your mind, and then that triggers you for actions. So the blueprint of any action is first created in the mind, and then the organs involved into making it a reality, making it into action. And this very blueprint, where the raw material, where is the source of the raw material for the blueprint? It's coming from chitta. So anything that rises from chitta in the form of tendencies, in the form of interest, in the form of thoughts, these are all called vrittis. These are all called vrittis. So vrittis keep rising from your chitta. That's why there's a constant chit chat in your mind. Constant chit chat in your mind. Why? Because there are vrittis which are feeding to your mind. And these feed of vrittis is what is manifesting as thought within your mind. So thought are the manifestation of vrittis which are raising from your chitta. Okay? So when these vrittis stop rising from chitta, then that means you become uh, restful. There is no restlessness. There is no unwavering nature of the mind. Whereas now it is completely in your control. Whatever information you want to bring out of your chitta, you will bring out only that. Not that the chitta will keep feeding you the uncontrolled stream of thoughts. When there's uncontrolled stream of thoughts, that means the chitta is kind of feeding vrittis to you. The vritti is constantly rising. You're not in the state of yoga. But when you are in the state of yoga, as per Raj Yoga, it is a state in which the vritti will stop rising from your chitta on its own. But in today's Raj Yoga, this very state of having no rise of vritti from chitta is understood as samadhi, which is actually a milestone before actual samadhi. This very state, when the chitta stops rising vritti, when does it happen in real journey of meditation? Actually, it happens the moment mind is dissolved to its source. There is no element now which can activate chitta. How does the chitta function? Chitta is an inert entity. Chitta cannot function on its own. Only when the mind brings the consciousness of the soul to the chitta, then in association with the mind, the chitta functions. Chitta functions only with the association with the mind. तीन करण मन से जगे मन अनु एक स्थान. Out of four inner organs, the three other inner organs, the chit, buddhi, and ahankar, these three inner organs are activated by the association with the mind. मन जड़ चेतन नहीं बने मन मध्यम प्रमाण, तीन करण मन से जगे मन अनु एक स्थान. It says that these inner organs are activated by the mind. So when the mind is dissolved to its source, which is just after self-realization, it is just just at the level of self-realization, I would say, just at the level of self, just at the level of Atma Sakshatkar, when you are beyond the body, when you are beyond mind, your chitta have already stopped raising vrittis. So the state which we consider as the complete yoga, actually that state is a state of self-realization only, where the vritti have stopped rising. But again, after that, every other state, the vritti have stopped rising. The moment you reach to the state of self-realization, from then on, there are further more journey. And in the entire journey, the vrittis have already stopped. So from the self-realization, you reach to the realization of Akshar Brahm, then the realization of Sadguru, then the realization of Almighty. In this whole journey, the vrittis have already stopped. It has already stopped right from self-realization itself. So saying that yoga chit vritti nirodha is actually true, but this is incorrectly understood by the translator of this. People thought that the moment my chit vritti stopped rising, that is the that is where I have realized Almighty. Though it is correct that when you realize Almighty, even in that state, the chitta has no vritti is rising. So yes, in the state of union with Almighty, there is no vritti is rising from chitta. But this very state of chitta vritti nirodha, this very state of chitta vritti nirodha has begun from the early stage of self-realization itself. So the real understanding of chitta vritti nirodha, the real understanding of yoga happens only when one learns to travel beyond the beginning of the chitta vritti nirodha. If somebody stops their journey right at the point where the chitta has stopped rising the vrittis, because the Patanjali Yoga Darshan says yoga chitta vritti nirodha. So the moment I have become thoughtless, now that means I have attained samadhi. This very misconception has spread today. The moment people become thoughtless, they think that my yoga's chitta vritti nirodha has happened. The moment one becomes thoughtless, They misinterpret that. They think that my yoga has happened. Whereas that state of thoughtlessness was just the control over the mind. Even when you control over mind, when you engage your mind just with one subject and you don't allow any other subject to rise, even at that point, you're not allowing any other britis to come into effect, because you're 100% keeping your consciousness with one briti. It is called ek briti. The dharana, what is dharana? Dharana is one briti concentration. You're not giving room for any other briti to rise, because for any other briti to rise, the consciousness has to connect to it. But you're keeping your 100% attention, your 100% consciousness to one briti, one subject. So, whichever focal point you concentrate on, you create one briti. The chitta has one briti now created for that experience, and you're constantly in that experience only. You're constantly looking at your focal point. So when you are constantly with one experience, it means you're constantly with one briti of your chitta. So when you're with one briti of chitta, you think that I have become thoughtless. But actually you're with one thought and you're not allowing the other thought to happen. So you misinterpreted that, oh, I have attained yoga sthiti. So I have heard many people saying that I went into 10 days camp and I was in the state of samadhi. Very, very loosely people throw this ball. They say that it was very unique. I attained samadhi, but after that it has never happened. In house, when I practice meditation, I've never got into that state of thoughtlessness. This very misconception need to be broken, because samadhi is way higher than becoming thoughtless. You can become thoughtless just by holding into one thought also. You think that you have become thoughtless, but actually you're holding on to one thought. But samadhi is way higher than that. So the conscious state of dhyan and samadhi begins where people have understood the end of Raj Yoga. The practitioner of Raj Yoga also have not reached to the real samadhi and dhyan, because people think that the moment I have got into the state of thoughtlessness, I have attained samadhi. They have labeled that very state of being thoughtlessness, being into thoughtlessness, as samadhi. Whereas that samadhi is nothing but dharana. They are just into dharana, in with one subject. Today, dharana has been misinterpreted as samadhi. That is the big gap of understanding in the practitioner today. We need to break out of it. So the Raj Yoga that people have understood as Raj Yoga is nothing but the initial stages of Vihangam Yoga. Whereas the complete Raj Yoga in reality is happening in the complete journey of Vihangam Yoga. Because Raj Yoga says that you have to go through Yam, Niyam, Asan, Pranayam, Pratyahar, Dharana, Dhyan, and Samadhi. Only when you attain the real Dhyan and Samadhi, then the real Raj Yoga will complete. And what is Dhyan and Samadhi? Sadgurudev says, शब्दाकार सो ध्यान है शब्द स्वरूप samadhi. Shabdakar means when your complete concentration is on what you experience the Almighty as. Meaning, the moment you start getting the experience of Almighty, automatically your entire attention will go there. This very state where your entire attention is on the supreme consciousness of Almighty is dhyan. That means the dhyan has begun, and this dhyan as progresses will convert into samadhi, where now in dhyan you are having experience of three things. You will know that I am concentrating on the Almighty, and this is Almighty, and I am concentrating. So you have the consciousness on three things. You have consciousness on self, you have consciousness on process, and you have consciousness on the supreme consciousness. When there are three things, the concentrator, the process of concentration, and the concentratee, meaning on which you're concentrating. When these three are into your consciousness, this is the state of dhyan. And what is the state of samadhi? Where all these three dissolved into one, where you don't even have the experience of yourself, not even the experience of you having concentrating on them. Rather, all your experience is the experience of Almighty. You're just experiencing the bliss of Almighty. That is where you're in the state of samadhi. 1 plus 1 becomes 1. When that happens, it's the state of samadhi. So when that very state happens, that's when the real Raj Yoga would happen. But today there's no practice leading to that. In the journey of Vihangam Yoga, when you raise your consciousness to Almighty and attain union, that's when the complete Raj Yoga happens. But the Raj Yoga that is known today, where people attain the state of thoughtlessness and they think that that's what is samadhi, that is the initial stages of Vihangam Yoga. That's why Raj Yoga that is known today is something which preludes Vihangam Yoga. So this is in a nutshell the Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Gyaan Yoga, Raj Yoga, and hopefully we have understood that Vihangam Yoga is no different. Vihangam Yoga is the practical process for attaining all these into one. All these into one. Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Gyaan Yoga, Raj Yoga. You are actually having all of these in 100% efficiency. You are having all of these in your journey of Vihangam Yoga. So if anybody says, what is Vihangam Yoga? You can confidently say, Vihangam Yoga is 100% form of Karma Yoga. When the other person says, what is Vihangam Yoga? You can say, Vihangam Yoga is 100% of Bhakti Yoga. What is Vihangam Yoga? Vihangam Yoga is 100% of Gyaan Yoga. What is Vihangam Yoga? Vihangam Yoga is 100% of Raj Yoga. In what angle if you look at from the angle of yam, niyam, asana, pratyahar, dhyan, dharana, samadhi, yes, that all is in Vihangam Yoga. So Vihangam Yoga is Raj Yoga. If you look at from the angle of devotion, yes, Vihangam Yoga journey cannot begin, cannot even progress from stage 1 without the attributes of devotion in it. What is Vihangam Yoga? Vihangam Yoga is the real darshan of entities, right from mind realization to the Panch Brahmandi Shabd, to Das Anhat, to Kundalini, to Dasham Dwar, to Akshar Brahm, to Sadguru, to Paramatma. Everything comes into experience in Vihangam Yoga. It's a Gyaan Yoga. So Vihangam Yoga is the supreme umbrella. Vihangam Yoga is a practical, is the name of the process of Brahma Vidya, is the name of the process of Bhakti Yoga. What to say? With this, I conclude for today. Sorry that we didn't keep room for discussion, no room for question and answer. Next week, when we resume the topic of karma, we'll take up all the questions and we'll progress further on karma. Jai Satgudev. Over to you, Shreyanji.
Thank you, Vijayji. So you explained Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Raja Yoga so beautifully, and helped us understand how this all connects to Vihangam Yoga. Or, how this how Vihangam Yoga encompasses everything. So the analogy that I would try to use here is, of a healthy person, right? So just saying that I do not have blood pressure, that doesn't mean I am healthy. Just by saying that I do not have fever, I'm not healthy. You know, when I am healthy from all aspects of body, that is when I am considered as healthy. So similarly, I think all these yogas should happen. We should have experiences from all these individual uh, what do you say, spiritual branches, I would say, uh, to say that we have attained yoga, or we have progressed very well in Vihangam yoga. So that is how I thought I can probably correlate it with how we understand a healthy person. So you need to have all the aspects in place to say that you have attained something. So it was really beautifully explained, Vijayji. I had this question in my mind for a very long time, because there are few dohas in Swarved which talks about these yogas, but it is being, it's a conscious knowledge, so it's very difficult to understand just reading from the bhashya. So it was a very very well, what do you say, very well narrated, and very very well explained session. So I really enjoyed it, and we very much liked it, and it was definitely enlightening to understand how all these yogas are connected to Vihangam yoga. So let's move on to the next part of our uh, session here. So give me a second, I'm trying to share my screen. Okay, so before we conclude, we would like to take a moment to recognize Warriors of the Week. Basically, Warriors of the Week is initiative started by Navy, because we all know that it is very important to meditate during Brahma Muhurta time, which is between 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. But because of our busy schedules, we are unable to take advantage of this time. This is basically a very very important time in sadhaks, or practitioners life. So to encourage all of us, Navy has started a WhatsApp group called Brahma Muhurat Warriors. The goal is to basically practice Brahma Muhurta meditation on your own, and report the status on the group by simply sending done. We don't send any other messages on that group. So there is no session to join, and you can at whatever time between 3 to 5 a.m, at whatever time you can meditate. You do it on your own, and just notify on the group that you are done with it. Basically, it's a good way to keep everybody engaged, and it's we help each other to stay motivated. So if you are interested in joining the group, please let us know, and we will send you the link so that you can join the group yourself. So we would like to take this moment to congratulate Warriors of the Week. This week's Warriors are Jaswinder Singh ji, Lal Mani ji, Maya ji, Prachi Kshirsagar ji. My name is also there. Shri Ram Sahu ji, Surya Alam Raju ji, Tejinder ji, Vinita Kumari ji, and Yogesh Kshirsagar ji. So, congratulations to everyone, and thank you for keeping us motivated, throughout the week. We also have inductees of the week. These are the people who have meditated at least once a day, once a week, maybe more than a week. They may have missed a single day, and that's why probably they are in the inductees of the week, because I recognize most of these names are part of the Warriors of the Week. So it's basically just the life that happens. But thank you everyone for keeping us motivated, and I would encourage all of us to take advantage of this Brahma Muhurt time to make faster progress in our spiritual journey. So now we have reached at the last phase of today's workshop. This in this phase we chant short version of Vandana, Arti, and Shantipat. Vandana is a prayer through which we seek blessings of Sadgurudev. We request a well-being, health, wealth, and seek his blessings for our spiritual knowledge. So I would request Niranjan ji to sing last four lines of Vandana. Over to you, Niranjan ji. Niranjan ji, are you on call? Yeah, Niranjan ji, you're on mute if you're talking. Okay, so Niranjan ji may be having some audio issues or connectivity issues. Can someone else volunteer for Vandana?
Jai Sadgurudev, Shrirangji, I can do the Vandana.
No, I
Thank
can
you.
do. I'm here.
Okay, go ahead then, Niranjan.
Yeah. प्रभु कल्प संत समाज उत्तम सर्वधर्माचार है जिमिन दयाश्रित सिंधु के हैं विश्व पथमय कार्य है प्रभु सत्य संत समाज तेरा आप रक्षा कीजिए जन सदा फल ज्ञान भक्ति वृद्धि दिन दिन कीजिए. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Niranjan ji. Our next prayer is Arti. Here we acknowledge the power of Almighty and pray that all disciples experience eternal joy, love, and freedom from worries under His holy guidance. I request everyone to stand up for Arti, and I would again request Niranjan ji to sing last few lines of Arti. Over to you, Niranjan ji.
Thank you, Siranji. Arti. गुरुमूर्ति गति चंद्रमा सेवक नयन चकोर पलक पलक निरखत रहे गुरुमूर्ति की ओर श्वेत श्वेतमय श्वेत है श्वेत श्वेतमय श्वेत तीन पाद अमृत भरा श्वेत महानद श्वेत अष्ट चक्र सब शून्य पर धरय धरा के पार तहाँ सदा फल घर किया भूल पड़ा संसार. देव की जय. Over to you, Sriram ji.
Thank you, Niranjan ji, for singing Vandana and Arti with devotional filled voice. So now we will move on to our last prayer. I will request everyone to sit down for Shanti Part. In the Shanti Part, we chant for peace for everyone in this universe. May Sadgurudev bless the entire cosmos with peace, love, and prosperity. I would request Dev ji to recite last few lines of Shanti Part. Over to you, Dev ji.
Jai Gurudev. Shantipath. Hey Prabhu Shanti Sharupo. Shanti Shanti Maya Shanti. Shanti Shanti Jana Shanti Ho. Purna Shanti Maya Shanti. Hey Prabhu Shanti Pradana Kara. Duro Sarva Shanti Deva Sadafala Shanti Maya Shanti Shanti Maya Shanti. Thank you.
Thank you, Devji, for reciting Shanti Part in melodious voice and with full of devotion. You keep all of us encouraged with your devotion. You have shown us that language is no barrier when it comes to spirituality. So thank you for keeping us motivated. Uh, so this concludes our today's session. So let's make sure that whatever we have learned from this session, we keep pondering about it and make sure that we try to bring those learnings in our life. So I would like to give special thanks to Vijay ji, Dev ji, Niranjan ji, Jessica ji, and other participants who were asking questions. So we are really sorry that we ran out of time today to take the questions, but as Vijay ji said, we will take those questions next week. So I pray to the Sadguru Dev for peaceful and spiritual week for all of us. Stay blessed. Thank you, and we will meet next Sunday at 10:30 a.m. EST. Thank you, everyone. Jai Sadguru Dev.